Good morning. I'm gonna wait until we have a couple more people entering and then I will start. Okay, let's wait a couple of minutes more. Okay, we already have a good number of, wait. Okay, apparently there was a store call now and there are some people still there. I'm gonna wait 1 minute more. Okay, we already have a good number of participants. We're gonna start. Good morning, everybody. My name is Camila Jaramillo. I'm the economist in charge of everything related of craft paper market in Europe. I've been working in the company in this market several years. And before I was working in the investment banking industry and in different companies in market research and consultancy. Today I'm going to talk about the Fastmarkets European kraft paper market outlook. My idea is to give you a summary of the current situation of the market, what is our outlook for the next couple of years, and I will give you some information also about the North American or US market, also because it's important and it's the second biggest market in the world. So before to start, I need to say that we have some legal limitations, so we don't give any information that breaches antitrust or competition law. So we cannot talk about price fixing. We are not going to give any price forecasting in this kind of conference. We are not talking about any agreements about competitors or anything related with anything that could affect antitrust and competition law. About like some announcement before I start. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A box. Don't use the chat. I will be replying all the questions in the end of the presentation, but you can do it during all the time. Also, this webinar is recorded. You can watch it on demand for 2 weeks. It's not possible to download it, but it's on demand in the link that you have. So, okay, entering in the topic, the kraft market in the last year. This is a kind of a small summary of the last 3 years. So in 2021, we have a very dynamic year with super tight demand after a difficult year in the pandemic, 2020. Then in 2022, there was a year full of challenges and opportunities. We could see differently political and macroeconomic changes that affect the market, ones like in a positive way and the others in a very complicated way. And that create a year that have different results depending on the region of Europe. And 2023, we start with a cooling down in demand, a more adjustment year, a year with high inventories. So main drivers of the current market situation. As I just mentioned, cooling in demand. The year started with like a contraction in demand. There are high inventories in most of Europe. Lower cost of energy and logistics, but still we are seeing high inflation. And something that have been like marking the last years of the industry have been capacity swings between sack kraft and other grades. I will explain that later. And for the moment, we're seeing some production decreased. So enter more to explain what is happening now in the market. So after a 2020 that I mentioned, it was difficult for everything related with the pandemic, contraction in main driver like construction. 2021 was a year that with very good demand, the demand grew in Europe 6.2%. And now we passed to a 2022 that in the beginning we expect that was a year that was more relaxed, but the first quarters of the year started with a tight demand, not only for normal traditional drivers or the market or the normal drivers, but also first because of new drivers that I will explain in like forward in other slide, but also for the political situation. As we all know, then during the year, the war between Ukraine and Russia started, and that generates that there was like some sanctions from the European Commission. And so some of them was the ban of imports of paper from Russia. And that generates that in the beginning of the year in EU, there was like a boom in demand, like people was scared about like paper scarcity, and they were buying a lot, like not to have problems of paper availability. That moment was more like people was prioritizing availability of paper than really prices, and that's something that also we will see like later when we talk about price. However, this is something I'm going to show in the next slide, even if I will come back to here. We could see that in 2022, the situation was not the same for all the regions. Well, Western, Central, and Southeastern Europe was showing an increase in demand. Eastern Europe, for everything related with the war, especially when Russia and Ukraine, show a big decrease in demand, and that bring European numbers to decrease in 2022, showing a contraction of 1.5% during the year when we talk about whole European numbers. In 2023, we expect a small growth, like the first 2 quarters of the year started with a very soft demand, a cool down, a contraction in demand due to the high inventories. Basically now, like converters and end users are focusing in the stocking activities. And this is why in the first quarter of the year, we don't see very good results for the sack kraft paper market. However, we are expecting these stocking activities ends for this second quarter, and better result we will see in the second half of the year, finally to show a growth of 0.3%. Then in 2024, we expect a rebound from economy. Now that it's during the year, we are also seeing some contraction in some macroeconomic variables. So from 2024, we expect a rebound and that the industry growth about 4%. Talking about the different situations of the region for 2023. We also expect different situations from the region. We expect Western Europe, Central Europe, and Southeastern Europe continue growing, while Eastern Europe is expecting to continue contracting, but in a more softer way. So it's they are already like getting better results. Here, that's something that is particular and interesting to mention is that for the downstream markets, it's for the sales of sack and paper sacks and bags. Like the shipments, for example, of paper sacks decrease, taking out Eastern Europe decrease in this side, while the paper demand increase. And this is why we see the destocking situation. You could see, for example, the numbers of the shipments of paper sacks. You can find it in the website of Eurosac. They just published it, I think, 1 week ago. I think, okay, sorry. For 2024, as you can see, we expect more like uniform perform, where we expect that finally all the regions come back to grow, and there is like a recovery of Eastern Europe. Coming back to this slide, I would like to talk about capacity and production. So in the last quarter of the year, 2022, we saw an important reduction in production. Also, like to keep prices high when there is a contraction in demand, and to adjust also production related on demand. That was something important to see, and this is a trend that we are still seeing for 2023 for the most of the year, like a reduction or like a slow growth in production. For capacity, it's important to say that, like everybody knows, there is a possible swing of capacity between sack kraft paper and kraft liner, and also between sack kraft paper and machine finished paper. This is why sometimes like drivers of the other side of the market could affect the sack kraft paper market results. Here, for example, in 2021, we see a reduction on capacity. That was like a swing of capacity to kraft liner. That was like having a boom on demand, especially for e-commerce in 2021. In 2022, we expect some of this capacity to come back, that in fact it happens, but during the second half of the year, we saw some swing of capacity from sack kraft to machine finished paper due to high energy prices, as the machines finished paper side of the market suffer a lot for the energy crisis, that some units of some mills have to close for some weeks, like have small closures. But this is why some of the capacity of sack kraft was used at some point to produce machine finished paper. For 2023 and 24, we are seeing different additional capacity. I will talk about that later, but many of them are going to be in Eastern Europe. Well, it's not going to affect the EU market as much as we expect before there was like the ban from Russian paper imports. So, okay, we already talked about it. So talking about a bit more the drivers. So why this situation is happening? Traditional drivers are decelerating since the end of 2022. Construction in the EU have been contracting already for 11 months. There are very high interest rates as a result of the high inflation in the EU, and that have been like affecting the construction output. Chemical and industrial production, also important traditional drivers of the industry, have been also contracting for the last months, for the last quarters actually. But better performance are expecting from the third quarter of 2023. This is why we are expecting also, that demand recovered for the second half. This is, for example, the value added of construction output in EU as you could say, that have been like during the last quarters, this orange line is like not growth, and this is negative and positive. So in the last quarters, that have been a contraction due to high interest rates, but we expect that this situation change for the second half of the year. And something that it's important, and is not only the traditional drivers, but also what have been boosting the consumption of sack kraft in the last year, and that will actually continue boosting for the future, are the new uses or the new drivers for sack kraft. First, the single-use plastic substitution, as most of you, I guess, know, the European Commission banned the use of light plastic bag in the EU. This is like the development of this is have been different depending on the country, but have been very good advances already in some countries, and that have been driven like the demand also of sack kraft paper. That are in 2025 there are already very important goals of plastic use of light plastic bags reduction, and this is something that will also affect in general of the kraft paper industry. The other driver is e-commerce. As you could see from this figure, like from 2020 to 2022, there are like the percentage of internet users that do online purchase in EU keep increasing. Of course, the biggest jump was in 2021 and after the pandemic, when in 2020 kind of the habits of people change, like from in-store purchase to more online one. But still in 2022, it's still increasing. And yes, thanks to the new uses of sack kraft paper and kraft paper, like for example, to produce these e-commerce pouches, e-commerce is also a barrier. And finally, everything related with flexible packaging, all the new uses for the kraft paper, like more adapted packaging to certain products. Also, there have been a lot of innovations about like new sacks that reduce some barrier plastic materials that they used before, and they are replacing it by paper. So have been a lot of new innovations of the way we can use paper, and a lot of them are related with flexible packaging. Why I'm putting like a single-use plastic substitution in deep black? First, because we are expecting that in the future, single-use plastic substitution have a bigger impact than e-commerce. Like in the beginning, we see like similar impact. Now we expect single-use plastic substitution have a bigger impact. And I put Central Europe because the development of these policies of single-use plastic substitution haven't been the same in all the sub-regions of Europe. And nowadays, when you see the statistics about the use of light plastic bags, there is still a lot of use, or the highest use of plastic bags are in like Central Europe, mainly like Czech Republic, Lithuania, Latvia. So we are expecting that this is like actually a region that have a lot to develop thanks to single-use plastic substitution. Talking about like what I have been mentioning a lot, and is the ban of Russian imports imposed by the EU. For all the paper grades, the impact was not the same. Like not all of them has a big imports from Russia, but the sack kraft paper market is very particular because we have big companies in Russia. Like one of the biggest companies of the market was is located in Russia. So the quantity of paper that used to be imported in 2021 from Russia to EU was a lot. It was 77,000 tons, which for a market that is not that big like the one of sack kraft paper in Europe is a big quantity. So this is also like helping us to see that why all these ban of Russian imports have actually impacted a lot the market results. The effect is also big in the machine finish and machine glaze side. And that also like created just all the fear of paper scarcity in the EU at the beginning of last year. EU exports outside the region decreased by 4.6 due to the paper scarcity and high prices in 2022. So now talking about what is happening with the net exports of Europe, considering now this ban. Here it's important to mention that I'm talking about like Europe in general, not only EU. So I'm including Russia in these numbers. So in 2021, like we saw a decrease of 5% in net exports due to the high domestic demand, and imports also decreased 7% due to the logistic prices that we saw in 2021. The principal exports of the region are unbleached kraft. Then in general, in all the years, in 2022, the trade was affected by the ban of Russian imports. Net exports decreased 2022. The export in 2022 decreased 5% also. Here decrease the exports from Russia to the EU, but also the exports of EU to outside Europe. In 2023, we expect that the exports go back to growth, mainly from Eastern Europe, as Russia's companies need to allocate quantities outside Europe. So they are already looking for new destinations, and they have been successful to allocate more quantities, especially in China, in Turkey, and in South Africa. So we are expecting that still that growth. And also because, as we were mentioning, there is like some capacity additions and that will like boost production and exports. Still, we need to see like what is going to happen with the converting units that Segesha just sold. Like this new company created by the Luxembourg Investment Bank that bought the converting units, like Advanced Industries Packaging, as they are gonna probably generate like new demand in EU companies, and that will probably like make that this increase wouldn't be that big. Top 5. When we talk about like external trade, as I mentioned before, this is all Europe. Here I would like to talk about like EU. So this is the top 5 export destinations outside EU. As Egypt, Mexico, Morocco, Indonesia, and Turkey. They have been almost the same all the time, have been the top destination. Usually this kind of graph, I have South Africa, but South Africa, the main provider is Russia. So as soon as I take out Russia, it goes out from my numbers. Here is important just to see that Russian companies will be important competitors for EU company exports outside Europe, especially from in China and South Africa, where they are already growing, mainly in unbleached kraft. Like actually, in 2023, from January to April, EU imports already decreased 58% due to the slower demand in the region. And the exports also decreased by 15% due to less production. Capacity changes in Europe. So that was something I was mentioning before. This is a summary of the capacity changes. I'm not gonna go to explain each of them, as there are different stuff, but you can have them when you see in the presentation on demand. But this is something important to see first. There are not usually a lot of like additional capacity coming all the time, as this is a very capital intensive market. But this last, like considering the boom of demand in these last years, this is a period where we are seeing like different capacity additions. Most of them are in the side of machine finish kraft, so not all of them go to sack kraft. But considering the swing of capacity, as I mentioned before, that will also like affect the sack kraft market in the sense that they will have like less pressure to produce machine finish or standard sack kraft if it is necessary. So also it's important here to see that there are new companies that were not in the business before that are entering in the business, like a Group, a Navigator company, that were companies that were like producing other kind of paper grades, and now they are entering in the sack kraft or kraft paper business. Other stuff that is important to mention is that most of these capacity additions are in Eastern Europe, so not all of them necessarily will need to affect the EU market, considering the ban of imports from Russia. And there are different doubts about the completion of all the projects. There were first some doubts about if the Russian companies will finish their projects that they were announced, considering the situation. But as we know, as far this is happening, but still we are not sure about like this project in Belarus, as it's supposed to start this year, but we are not sure. We haven't listening about the starting point. So this is important to see if it's going to be a delay. That is a capacity of 160,000 that will come anyway in the market. Also, all these new capacity changes are important to consider because they are a lot of them are bringing new, more efficient machines with like a generate a very important cost reduction and be more competitive. And this is also gonna affect the cost structure of the market, and it's important to consider that. Okay. Talking about cost, before I go into prices, I would like just to talk about a bit the cost situation in 2022, mainly, where we saw very high energy prices. Again, the war between Russia and Ukraine was a big, you say, like a big participant or a bit driver in this situation. Considering the high dependency that Europe had before from Russian gas, and basically the stop from Russian gas receiving in Europe or in EU generate that the last years the prices increased to super unexpected and high levels. That affected the prices of energy for all the industries in Europe, and like sack kraft and machine finish and machine glaze industry were not the exception. So you can see this big peak around August 2022 that showed super high prices. Since that, prices like authorities and government have found like new resources or new sources of energy, so they are importing more liquid gas, and this is why prices have been decreasing. Now the reserve of gas in Europe are good, but still there are some uncertainty or what could happen in the case like of a Chinese market recovery and they demand Chinese economy recover, because at the moment is behaving under expected, but if at some point it recover and start to demand more liquid gas, if it's gonna also affect like energy prices in the end of 2023 for Europe. But for the moment, what we see is prices decreasing in energy. They are almost at the same level of July 2021, at least higher, but the decrease have been like strong in the last months. Here it's important to mention that and I think I already kind of say something related with that the impact of the energy situation was not the same to all the industry. There was an asymmetric impact. It was not the same what happens to the sack kraft paper industry that would happen to the MF and MG side, as most of this is something here that I have. And most of the sack kraft paper industry is integrated, and they produce their own energy. They produce very like a big part of their energy, while what we call buy and use, that is back converting another, that machine basically is machine finish and machine glaze. Big part of the industry is not integrated, like be more exposed to these increases in energy prices. And this is why, as I mentioned before, there had to be some closures, small closures of capacity of our production in last year in the MF and MG site, in companies that were not integrated and that were really affected by the energy prices. In the sack kraft industry, the impact was not very big. They only purchased the 22.8 or their total for the energy. And of the total use of energy, gas only represents 3.6%. So here, but energy cost is not the only cost. Still, even if energy prices have been decreasing like in a significant way in the last months, doesn't mean all the costs are decreasing. We are still seeing a high inflation, even if inflation have been a bit cooled down since 2022 peak. We still see a high inflation. Actually, for 2023, is expecting a inflation of 6.7% in the European Union, which is still like much higher than more, we say, the target numbers we have seen in the last years. And this generates also that we have high interest rate. And these two variables are impacting also the cost of labor, SG&A, and capital costs. So also wood prices are high for the first quarter of the year, also like they generated an impact in cost. And it's important to mention that even if energy reductions have been strong, not all the companies have been seeing it immediately. Most of them had long-term contracts to cover for a change in prices. So still costs are decelerating, but we expect that for 2023 have like a small increase. So yeah, so also the energy prices that are like what boosts most the cost last year are decreasing in a significant way. There are other components of cost that are still increasing. And yes, then we talk about like prices that I think that I wanted to talk about cost and market situation to arrive to this point and see why these prices were driven and how we achieved like the big increase we got last year. Last year we got like the highest prices never seen in the industry from the first quarter of 2021 to the third quarter of 2022. Prices increased for 84%, which is like a very significant increase. As you could see, cost increases had a high impact, but no one in a direct proportion. As I just mentioned before, sack kraft market was not as impacted as other side of the market, but the energy situation. So also like companies achieved very high margins last year, like sack kraft paper producers. Like increasing prices were not only driven by what was happening in the sack kraft side of the market, but also in the machine finish and machine side. This is also something that helped prices to increase that much. And yes, and to give like these integrated companies like good margins for 2022. For the fourth quarter of 2024, as I mentioned before, demand was already cooling down, so the prices were stable. Prices didn't decrease directly as production also it was showing a contraction. And in the first quarter of 2023, what we have seen is that the prices have showing an increase, a decrease, but not as big decrease considering the contraction in demand we are seeing. But this is mainly happening because of the high destocking situation. And it's like, as there are not that many transactions of the market nowadays, they are not like actually reflecting totally what is happening in the market. Probably as much transactions happens, like we will see like that the prices will adjust totally to the situation in the market. So here I'm finishing with the European kraft paper market. I tried to do a small summary. I hope it was clear to all of you. If you have questions, please let me know. I'm gonna do a quick mention about what is happening in US market, as for some of you it's important for your strategy, and it's also a big market in the world. So I'm gonna do a small mention and then we can go for Q&A. So to talk about a bit about the US kraft paper market grades, different than in Europe, multi-wall or sack kraft is not the biggest grade for US, as they are not having like a construction industry that is like that driven by that is using a lot of cement, as you know, like the construction in like materials in US are very different than the ones that we use in Europe. So the main the main grades for them are everything that is like machine finish and machine glaze, and that we put together and convert in another packaging and grocery and other bags. So first, talking about the sack kraft paper market, unlike Europe in 2020, they show like a important increase. As I just mentioned before, here in US, this is less driven by construction industry. It was mainly driven, but there was more you said that like pandemic related consumption items. So there were more people like consuming in house and buying like big sacks of flowers, pet food. So this was driven like the consumption in 2020. It was mainly like boosted by the unbleached segment of the market, and yes, that boost the demand in 2020 and 21. In 2022, there was a contraction of demand, mainly to weaker spending hurt by inflation. And we expect in 2023 demand increase, first to a growth of inventory building, like as there was not level of inventory was very low in 2022 in US. And also for anti-dumping measures in the downstream market. This in the recent news, I have read that there are like some kind of ban of import from 9 different economies from sacks and paper bags to US, as they were like selling in lower prices, and that will actually spell it boost the demand from domestic converters to local producers in the market in 2023. For the side of the machine finish and machine glaze part, as we call it here, is back converting another kraft paper. In 2020 and 22, like kind of a pandemic boost, some change of consumption, like there were more people preferring use chop paper shopping bags than the reusable bags, and that boost the consumption in 2021, also with all the economic recovery. So this is why 2021 was interesting. But then inflation and other macroeconomic situations affect the consumption in 2022. Different than sack kraft, we expect that in 2023 there is still a contraction in the market, also driven by macroeconomic conditions and some inventory correction, to grow again in 2024. Then talking about like the exports, here we put sack kraft and other kraft all together. We could see that sack kraft exports from US have been increasing from 2020 to 22, like gradually. Most of US exports are going to Latin America, Canada, and Asia. Not a lot of them are going to Europe, but they are important competitors if European companies want to go, for example, to the Latin American market. They are also going to see big competition in Asia, as just mentioned before, like Russia is like increasing a lot their market power there. Latin America counted the 42% of U.S. sack kraft export in 2022, when the largest destinations are Mexico and Guatemala. We expect that in 2023, there will be a drop in exports due to a softening global demand driven by macroeconomic conditions. As far from January to April 2023, exports are already down 20% in the US. And finally, to summarize, the prices development in the US kraft paper grades. Here for US, we actually we collect prices for more grades. So you could say like 2 different sack kraft grades and different like bag and grocery grades that are more like machine finish and machine glaze driven. It's important here to see that prices have started to decrease first in US than in Europe. For example, in the grocery bags, you could see that from July, they are increasing. And in the part of multiple sack or sack kraft paper, from November 2022 to May 2023, they are already increasing 4%. To explain what happens here, like in 2021, there were like capacity swung from kraft to containerboard that actually like was like driven these prices high. For 2023, it's important to mention that we expect that several new containerboard lines are starting up. So they are also like likely to produce kraft paper grades. And this is bringing like a current operating rates under 90%. This is the presentation. I hope I can solve some of your doubts, and let me know if you have questions. I also invite you to see our recurrent reports. We have the European paper packaging 5-year forecast, and we have there like the sack kraft 5-year forecast if you want to keep updated with all our numbers. Also, something that I want to mention before I finish this presentation is that we are not here considering that like the war between Ukraine and Russia could, will end anytime soon. So we are not considering any recovery of Ukrainian economy, which, as far for the next, for the years we forecast. So something that is important to have in mind is in the case that finish, we all need to know that there will be like a important boost in construction in Ukraine, thanks to all the reconstruction that we'll need in the country, and that will probably like boost the sack kraft paper industry in a very important way. So this is something we will need to see and probably like check that as a scenario. But for the moment, this is not considered. Okay, I'm gonna wait until I have some questions, and then I'm gonna start to answer them. Okay, they're asking me, is there shortage expected in the EU sack kraft market due to the production reductions? No, for the moment. We are expecting that production will actually accommodate depending on demand drivers, and for the moment production is also decreasing exactly to respond to the demand contraction. But if at some point the demand like go to growth, like there is like all the capacity available to there are like some production increases and as I just mentioned before, there are also some capacity additions expecting, not only in the Eastern Europe side, but also, for example, in Central Europe, where, for example, companies like Mondiars are having projects to have important capacity additions. Other question, let me see. Okay. New capacity conversion, given the need for integrated soft-wood pulp to be truly cost competitive for many end products, do you expect increase in not integrated capacity via conversion at the top of cost curve in the future years? Sure. Actually, I don't, from the side of sack kraft paper, I don't expect a lot of non-integrated conversions. I expect more for the side of machine finish and machine glaze, not for the sack kraft industry, as it's very difficult to be competitive considering if you are not integrated, considering that most of the companies are integrated. So yes, I mean, if they are not integrated, they will be like much more expensive. Okay. Here's a question about prices. I don't really can give future prices, but they are asking me like if in the future, I mean that nowadays the polypropylene bags in Africa and MEA are having like much lower prices. That if I think that that could influence the sack kraft prices in EU. Even if I cannot give a talk about the trends in prices in the future, I can tell you that yes, that could have an influence as much as paper needs to be like competitive. However, there is still a lot of possibility growth inside Europe, and even if in Africa and MEA the prices of plastic bags are still low, and that will influence. There are also other places where like these plastic substitutions, I say policies are impacting. For example, there are other destinations like Latin America where like there are starting to be policies. For example, in Colombia, not that long ago, they started to do that. And even if there are not policies, there are already some clients that per se only by the idea of being more sustainable are like a kind of demanding that their packaging is like a more like environmental friendly. So I don't think the how you say that there will like send I cannot say really like future oil prices. There will be an influence, but that will not be big, if this is what I can tell you. Do you see a difference in demand fluctuation for bleach and unbleached sack kraft in Europe? Yes, usually like unbleached sack kraft paper is much more market sensitive. Like it's bleach, it's a bit more like stable, the change in demand. So yes, there is a different demand fluctuation, like there is like unbleached response much quicker to change in demand drivers. Also that you could see it in prices if, I don't know if you have the opportunity, but if you have the opportunity to check our prices, you will see that usually pledge prices for bleach are more stable than from unbleached. I think I moved from some of one. Volume-wise, how do you see plastic substitution releasing in the coming years? Okay. Volume-wise, how do you see plastic substitution releasing in the coming years in European markets for kraft paper? So as I mentioned before, nowadays we see it as one of the biggest driver to boost the market. I cannot give you an exact number in this moment of like, for example, if it's the 20% of the demand, as I don't have the number here. But if you want, send me an email in my personal, in my corporate email, and we could talk about this number further. Sorry. Do you have any longer term a view on demand growth in sack kraft paper or any estimate on the boost we could see from plastic to paper longer time? Yes, we have it. As I mentioned it just in the question before, this is not part of this presentation, but we have estimation of how much will be the plastic substitution impact in per year. Also, we already have estimations of what we expect of the demand growth. We have an our 5-year forecast until 2027, and also time to time we also produce 15 years forecast. But as I just mentioned, this is not part of this presentation. If you are more interested in like longer views, you can send me an email to send me an email and I can we can revise this data together. Do you see a difference in demand fluctuation for bleach and unbleached? As I already replied. How the prices will be moving forward 2024 for sack kraft paper? I am sorry, I cannot, as I mentioned it before, I cannot give information about the future prices, like as that could be against the antitrust and competitive like law. So I cannot, competition law, so I cannot give this information. Strange to see significant U.S. exports to Latin America, while Brazil and Chile are vertically integrated big manufacturers with significant exports volumes. I can tell you that Brazil are big manufacturers. In Chile, there is not like a big companies. But still, there are very big markets, not only Brazil and Chile. We have, for example, Mexico, that is one of the biggest destinations of European kraft paper, sack kraft paper, mainly because of their cement industry. And there are also still a lot of U.S. exports to Latin America, also because of prices and how competitive they could be. So yeah, basically the big producers in Latin America are like Brazilians, and still sometimes there is not like enough paper, or that could be like more positive for them to export. So this is why still like Latin America is an important, we say like a destination for U.S. exports. Do you put e-commerce and flexible packaging as major drivers of kraft demand? Will this not be back paper and specialty? Okay. As I mentioned before, that could be like swing of capacity between these two grades all the time, and in the end, you could produce machine finished paper in a sack kraft machine, or you can use sack kraft standard for use for create like paper bags. So in the end, this is important. Also, there are like some e-commerce, you call that pushes, that are like make already with a stronger paper, like a sack kraft paper. Like it's important that nowadays we are not, we need to consider that sack kraft paper nowadays is not used only to produce sacks, it's also used for new demands. It's actually even used nowadays at some, how you say, protection materials inside the boxes. There are different uses that we were not seeing before and nowadays are seen. So this is why I'm putting that there. You mentioned new U.S. containerboard capacity potentially producing kraft paper. Which players in particular you see doing this? Okay, I don't have this information here, as the specialist of U.S. market is our basic president of packaging and kraft paper, like Beth List. But I can ask her, and if you send me an email directly, maybe we can talk about it. Will the presentation be shared with the participants? As I mentioned it in the beginning, you cannot download it, but you can watch it on demand for 2 weeks with the link we provide in the beginning. On balance, considering both supply and demand, do you see the market tightening it for sack kraft over the next 12 months, or do we expect demand to be weak going forward? I think as I mentioned before, we are expecting that the demand to recover since the second, like from the second quarter of from the second half of the year, excuse me. Actually, we are expecting that normal seasonality that usually is for the market in the second quarter of the year probably goes to the third one. So we expect a better performance in the second quarter, in the second half of the year. However, we are also expecting some capacity increases and some production increases in the end of the year. So no, we are not seeing the market really tightening. Actually, we are seeing from the end of 2023, we are seeing that operating rates are going down actually for these capacity additions. How do you see the demand in S2 2023? Strong, weak, or stable? For the moment, it's still weak. There is a lot of destocking. There are people that was expecting that destocking finish in the first quarter, but okay, I think that this is semester 2. In the semester 2, as I mentioned, maybe not as strong, but with good results. We expect a recovery. I mentioned it before. There is going to be a recovery in the construction side of the market, in the chemical side of the market, better macroeconomic conditions. So we expect that there are a recovery for the second half of 2023. Do you see higher wood costs impact the production of kraft paper in Europe, in particular in Sweden and Finland? Wood costs are higher for longer. That will impact production costs for sure, and that will I cannot talk about prices, so I cannot tell you what will happen with prices, but yes, the quantity of production, I don't think it's going to be impacted, but that will affect cost. How do you see the usage of 100% recyclable sack kraft paper in the future? I see it. I don't, probably not the expert of that. I think that will be better to talk it with our engineers, but I see it difficult considering the characteristics of the sack kraft paper bags that the sack paper bags, sorry, that the extensibility they need to have, the porosity they need to have. As we have been checking with our engineers, it's very difficult to achieve that for the moment with 100% recyclable sack kraft. What is more profitable on average? Produce kraft liner, sack kraft, machine finish, machine grade. We think about producers prioritizing swings of capacity between grades. I think that changed a lot depending on the market situation. I mean, I could tell you that in 2022, in the end, I think the most profitable was to produce sack kraft, but this is something that changed depending of the market situation, and we will need to make a deeper analysis of the quarter and go deeper also of kraft liner conditions. So I will need we will need to explore more to answer well this question. This is another question about plastic replacement versus traditional building and construction activity. As I just mentioned, I don't have the number here, but if you want, send me an email and we could actually talk about deeper in what is our estimation on plastic substitution and impact for the following years as a driver. I think I answered all the questions. It was a bit difficult actually to put all this information in this small webinar because there are a lot of things happening nowadays in the markets. If you have much more doubts, please send me an email to my corporate email that is in the presentation. We could be talking about the market. And yes, I hope you get complete information from this webinar, and I thank you so much for your attendance. Thanks.